dear viewer, and welcome to the Broken Expanse. Welcome, everybody. Today we have some encounters so creepy, so spine-chilling, you may be sleeping with one eye open from now on. So turn out the lights, sit back, and let's get into the video. It's a warm summer's night, and a young couple have just been on a date. We'll call them Tom and Alice. After enjoying a movie together and grabbing a bite to eat, Tom agreed to drive Alice home as to not miss her curfew. But on the way back, checking the time, they noticed they still had a little while before their respective parents expected them to be home. So they decided to park for a while in a little clearing in a nearby wooded area for a makeout session. After a time of playing tonsil hockey and listening to music, they agree that it's getting dangerously close to the time that they needed to be back home again. So Tom agrees to drive Alice back. However, he informs her that he just needs to take a leak first. And so he steps out of the car and walks off into the tree line and eventually disappears from Alice's sight. After 30 seconds or so, the song on the radio is interrupted by an emergency news broadcast for the local area.
We interrupt this broadcast for an emergency news bulletin. A convict has escaped from a nearby facility. They are considered extremely dangerous. Do not leave your homes and lock all of your doors and windows. Identifying features are the convict is male, middle-aged, and has a hook in place of his right hand. I repeat, convict is extremely dangerous. Do not leave your homes and keep all doors locked.
Alice was terrified. She began to tremble and breathe in slow, shallow gulps. She leapt across and locked all of the doors in the car before huddling back into her seat and waiting for Tom to return so they could get back home, back to where it was safe. But time continued to pass. 1 minute, then 2, then 5. Every moment drawn out, intensifying the fear. Where the hell was Tom? They needed to get the hell out of here. These thoughts playing over and over in her head. Then Alice screamed. It sounded like it was coming from the roof, right above her. It couldn't be the convict. Surely not. Sure, there was an escaped convict on the loose, but the probability of them crossing paths was slim to none. Right? She desperately tried to reassure herself. Then it happened again. Another gasp left her clenched throat. Maybe it was Tom. Sure, just Tom playing a prank. She said his name through bated breath. Nothing. Then again, louder this time. Still, nothing. Then another thud, and scrape across the car roof. This is too much. She just needed to go out and tell Tom to stop playing around. Tell him that there's a killer on the loose. They needed to go. She reached over to unlock her car door, slowly and cautiously opening it and creeping out. Stood still facing away from the car, almost too petrified to move. She took a deep breath and forced herself to turn and face the car roof. It was Tom all right, hanging upside down, legs bound to a tree branch above the car, throat slit in a rough, jagged fashion, in a way that could only be done by something old, something rusted, something hooked. Then, a gust of wind hit. The wind had bounced the branch the rope was tied to. The sound she kept hearing was Tom's lifeless head banging across the roof of the car, and the nails on his dead fingers scraping the metal. That's when she feels it. A cold metal object scraping down her arm from behind her.
Want to join him?
It's a Saturday night and Mr. and Mrs. Evans are getting ready to go out for their bi-monthly date night. Their daughter Sally, while usually babysat by her grandmother, was going to be spending her first night in the home alone, since her parents finally felt that she was old enough to take care of herself for an evening. This was great, Sally thought. Sure, she wouldn't be doing anything too wild, but she could stay up a little later than usual, message friends, and even order takeout. And besides, her parents had given their permission for the family dog, a large German shepherd named Bruce, to spend the night indoors as to make sure she would be safe from any would-be intruders. It was going to be a fairly chill but still pretty awesome night. Sally's parents leave and she spends the night doing just as she planned, messaging friends, eating pizza and binging Netflix. At around 11 p.m., Sally starts to feel tired and decides it's time to head to bed. Besides, her parents were usually home about 1 a.m. anyway, so it would wrap the evening up quite nicely. After finishing her evening routine, Sally ushers Bruce into her room, where he finds a place under the bed to curl up and get some rest. She turns out the light and gets into bed, but just before falling asleep, she places her hand beside her bed and feels Bruce's wet tongue lick her gently, reassuring her that everything was all right. She then lifted her hand back under the covers and promptly fell asleep. Not long after, though, Sally stirred slightly, hearing a strange noise coming from the bathroom, which was situated right next to her room. It was an odd, dripping sound. Thinking it was just one of the taps not having been turned off all the way, she considers getting up to turn it off. But, this being her first time in the house alone, she quickly realized that she felt a bit too apprehensive and would leave it, as her parents would surely be back soon, and they would make sure it was turned off. Again, to reassure herself, she reaches down her hand and is once again greeted by an affectionate lick from Bruce, and so Sally drifts off once more. Not long later, she's awoken again by a similar dripping sound, although this one slightly different, like water dripping onto more water. Had she left the plug in? Maybe the small drip from the faucet had built up in the basin. Why would she have left the plug in, though? Sally turned and saw the time on her alarm clock read 12:40 a.m. She sighed in relief. Only another 20 minutes or so, and her parents would be home. It's not like the sink was going to overflow and destroy the house in 20 minutes, she reasoned. So again, reaching down, she let Bruce's wet kisses assure her that there was nothing to worry about, and she went back to sleep. Then, awoken again, Sally hears screaming from the bathroom. She looks at the clock. 1:15 a.m. It was her mother. Oh no, what if the sink had overflowed? She was in big trouble, and she knew she wouldn't be able to sleep, knowing how much trouble she'd be in the morning. So she decided to face the music sooner rather than later. But as she gets close to the bathroom door, she hears sobbing. Why would her mother be crying over an overfilled sink? That's when she opened the door. It wasn't water covering the bathroom. No, the dripping she had heard was blood. Blood pooled underneath Bruce's strung-up body. As Sally moved her eyes upwards to face her now deceased canine companion, she saw it, written on the mirror in Bruce's blood. Humans can lick too. Kenny was driving down a dark country road that connected the city from where he worked to the city in which he lived, when he saw a hitchhiker standing on the side of the road, hailing him down. Kenny's first reaction was to keep driving. After all, he was tired, especially with all the overtime he'd been putting in. It was cold, already dark, and all he wanted to do was go home and eat and sleep. The thought of making a potentially significant detour to drop off some hitchhiker was not an idea he wanted to entertain. Although, after taking a breath, he thought it better to be kind than selfish. After all, it was winter now, and the road from this point was another 10 miles to the city. Not far in a car, but a hell of a walk in the cold. So Kenny stopped by a little further down the road from the hitchhiker and flashed his lights at him to signal that he was willing to give him a ride. The man entered the car and thanked Kenny for stopping. This man was rather insignificant, in that he had no real defining traits. He, for all accounts, just seemed like a fairly normal guy. They made small talk for a minute or so, discussing the weather, the long nights and short days, that kind of thing. At one point, the hitchhiker asked Kenny what he does for a living. Kenny obliges and tells him that he works in the outdoor loading station of a car manufacturing plant, but that, admittedly, while he's used to the heavy lifting and operating the machinery, it's been a little tougher recently, as his winter coat was stolen off the back of his chair when he went to the restroom at a bar a few weeks prior. The hitchhiker was courteously empathetic, and mused that there are many out there in the world who only think of themselves, but not to feel discouraged, as there are also just as many people who are kind and caring. Like you, the hitchhiker spoke with a smile. Kenny looked in his rearview mirror, feeling slightly hesitant to accept the compliment. Changing the subject, Kenny asked the man, "So what about you? What do you do?" The hitchhiker's eyes went solemn, as though suddenly reminded of some great tragedy he had momentarily forgotten, albeit still with a smile on his face. Nothing. Not anymore. Then, with a short glance outside, seeing that they had entered the city limits, he followed up, asking Kenny if he could drop him off. Pulling over, they bid each other a pleasant farewell, and Kenny continued on his way. Upon arriving home, just as he was about to lock the driver's side door, he noticed something in the back seat. Opening the back door to the car, he saw a thick winter's coat, laying neatly folded there. Somewhat perturbed, he assumed that the hitchhiker had left it in his car and not realized before leaving. So Kenny grabbed the coat and headed inside. After getting in, placing his keys down and putting some leftovers in the microwave, Kenny turned on the TV and began looking in the coat pockets for a way to return the coat to the hitchhiker. Then, on the TV, the news spoke about a fatality that had happened late the night before, on the very road Kenny had picked up the hitchhiker. Apparently a man had been driving down the road at night when his car had broken down, and on a road like that with no signal, the man had decided to walk his way back to the city. But unfortunately, due to the dark, a truck driving down the road didn't see the man and struck him from behind, killing him instantly. Kenny looks up from the coat to see the picture on the screen. It was the hitchhiker, a man named Joseph Keats. In shock, Kenny's hand inadvertently grazes something in the inner breast pocket of the coat. Pulling the object out, while trembling and mouth hanging in disbelief, he looks down. A small card with a message reading, "My friend Kenny, I finally made it back to the city. Thank you. May this coat keep you warm for many winters to come. Until I can meet you again. Your friend, Joe." I hope you enjoyed today's video, everyone, and that you're suitably creeped out. With Halloween only a few days away, let me know in the comments, what are your plans for this year's spooky day? You can also let me know what you'd like me to cover next, either here or on my Reddit page, which I'll link in the description below. And if you want to spread a bit of love and positivity in the world, I'd really appreciate if you click that like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget the little bell notification icon too. It really means a lot. And as always, take care everyone, and don't stray too far from the path,
lest you end up in the broken expanse.